We continue to share about Rabbi Arizal, the story of Rabbi Arizal's Nesiah, his journey, his trip to Eretz Yisrael. We had discussed previously Rabbi Arizal's trip to Kamenetz, a city that he visited before starting out on his trip to Eretz Yisrael, and the fact that this was entailed and shrouded in mystery. Now, it was known though, Rabbi Arizal himself said that it was very necessary to go to this city before beginning his trip to Eretz Yisrael. When Rabbi Arizal returned from this city of Kamenetz, immediately afterwards, his youngest daughter was nostalgic. She passed away. The connection, of course, was a very significant one. Rabbi Arizal said that he understood that this would happen. It would have to happen, because he was about to embark on one of the most important aliyahs in the realm of Kedusha and holiness. And therefore he would have to do battle with the Satan himself, who would try to stop him as he had succeeded in stopping the Baal Shem Tov and others before him. As we explained too, the greatest tzadik of all time, Moshe Rabbeinu, had made every attempt to get to Eretz Yisrael during his lifetime, and now in the Ibur, the Skalgel, partially in Rabbi Arizal, he was about to realize the fulfillment of his dreams, of his hopes. Therefore, there would naturally be a tremendous battle on the part of the Satan to stop this Aliyah in Kedusha. Rabbi Arizal compared this to the case of the Arizal. Arizal had revealed secrets of Torah, the Sifrei Kabbalah, the writings of the Arizal, that were so great they taught the world a new type of limud, a new type of learning. It made the Zohar HaKodesh comprehensible to all. It taught a new type of chachma, wisdom, in Torah, revealed a new facet of the Torah itself, the chachmas ha'emes, the wisdom of truth. Now this, the Arizal, taught to his disciple, his main disciple, the Chaim Vitalzal. And when the Arizal revealed once a secret that was written in the Zohar HaKodesh, but Rabbi Shimon Yochai said, "This is a secret that I will not reveal." Now the Arizal revealed this secret to the Chaim Vitalzal. Immediately afterwards, the Arizal's son died. He passed away. Arizal cried over it and said, I was born, I came to this world for the sake of revealing this secret to the Chaim Vitalzal. That's the reason I came to this world. So I did not commit any wrong. And yet despite that, I was punished for it. I have to suffer for having my son pass away more than once. So this is something that we cannot really understand. Why, if it is so important a mitzvah, it is his goal and mission in life, and yet the tzaddik must suffer because of this. This is why Rabbi Nachman said it is to be expected. This is the goal of a tzaddik, and these are the tribulations that he must endure during his lifetime. Despite this, Rabbi Nachman said, I will not stop. I won't think. I won't hesitate. I won't have any doubts about continuing my plans for this trip. Rabbi Nachman said that in going to Eretz Yisrael, he would go to the grave of his grandfather, the one he was named after, his father's father, Rabbi Nachman Haridenka Zal, one of the main Talmidim of the Baal Shem HaKodesh, who was buried in the city of Tiberias. There are a few people who found his grave there, visiting Tiberias. It's difficult to find the grave. It's one of the hidden parts of the old cemetery. But the man said he would do something there to arrange a type of contact with his grandfather where he could be able to speak to him when he gets back home again. This type of contact, of course, is something that is made for tzaddikim themselves. He made this statement. Unlike Beimer, Rabbi Arizal left his home to begin this journey. Very fittingly, it was unlike Beimer because like Beimer is the day of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal's Histalkus, Hilula. day of his Hilul and his Neshama shines brightly through the world. Now Arizal's connection, relation to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, of course, is known, that they are practically one. Rabbi Arizal's name, Rabbi Nachman ben Simcha, is Begimatria Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, exactly. Also, to add to this too, as is known, Rabbi Arizal preferred always to be called by his mother's name, Rabbi Nachman ben Fega, and there too, Shimon ben Yochai Zal is known to be called Rashbi. In fact, the entire Sichos, the secrets of the Torah, contained in the word Bereshis. Bereshis is the letters S. S is a word that means nothing and yet encompasses everything. There's no translation to the word S, yet S covers, adds everything that can be covered. For example, Bereshis Bara Elokim es hashamayim v'es haaretz. Beginning, Hashem created the heavens and the earth. Why not hashamayim v'haaretz? Why es hashamayim? Es has no meaning. And yet the Gemara says es adds everything that was in the heavens, es haaretz, everything in the earth. Because though es has no meaning, es is still the first and last letters of the Aleph Beis. Aleph the Taf, it covers all. The word Bereshis is es Rashbi, es Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal, es meaning Oir Teiras Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. In this case too, Rashbi, es Rashbi, Rashbi is Begimatria Rabbi Nachman ben Fega with the Asius. So we see again the closeness, the connection between the two, and that's why it was very fitting that Ben left down like Bena. At this time, shortly afterwards, the war began, the penetration, the invasion by Napoleon to Egypt. In his battle towards Egypt, he was headed for Egypt and Eretz Yisrael, and that caused a war to break out between the French and the Turks. Between France and Turkey, in order to get to Eretz Yisrael, had to go through Turkey first. This first stop had to be in Turkey, leaving Russia. So, of course, this would entail personal danger. Arizal left and reached the city, the capital city of Turkey, which at that time was divided into two parts. He reached the part called Galita, that was the regular part of the city of Istanbul, and then the other half of the city, which he moved to shortly afterwards, the main capital where the Sultan's palace was, the part called Istanbul or Stambul, was a special select part of the city, the Sultan's part, where only men could enter. There were no women in that part of the city, which of course shows the hypocrisy of the Turks. Because as the Gemara says, there is no one who is so fested, so filled with the evil, in that respect, the worst of all evils, as the Ishmaelim, the Turks. So hypocritically, they left out women from their capital city. Arizal stayed in that part of the city. He stayed in a special achsanya, an inn, and he waited there for the opportunity to get a ship to Eretz Yisrael. And while there, he was told that there were two Jews from his section, his country, who were coming back from Eretz Yisrael, a visit to Eretz Yisrael. Now, these two were sort of Talmidim attached to Rabbi Avraham Zal. Avraham Zal was had been the head of the Yishuv, all the communities of Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael at that time, for a period of about 10 years by that time. He was the chief rabbi of the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael. Being chief rabbi, he handled the funds that came in. The Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael, the Jews living there, lived only by the money that was amassed, accumulated, or collected by those who visited the European cities and brought these funds back. The Jews in Israel depended upon that money. Aharon Zal, being the holiest tzadik then, the leader of all the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael, was the one who oversaw the distribution of these funds. At that time, a slight controversy broke out, because in European communities. They lived at that time the head of the first Rebbe of the Lubavitcher movement, known as the Baal HaTanya. He wrote the Sefer Tanya. This is why he was called the Tanya, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. When he wrote this Sefer, for some reason, there was controversy about it, disagreement, and the Avraham Zal disagreed with the writings of this Sefer. Because of this, a conflict broke out between these two tzaddikim, and the Baal HaTanya opposed the Avraham Zal's handling the monies that came to Eretz Yisrael. How could these two giants, these two tzaddikim, have this type of bitter conflict? That, of course, is not our affair. We are too small to enter into this. Arizal warns that when you see a machlokus between tzaddikim, do not ever dare to suspect any one of them, because the machlokus is due to something much higher than the physical part you see. It's due to things that occur in heaven and spheres and so on, so that we cannot enter into the reasons for this machlokus. We know only that the Avraham Zal was the greatest tzadik in Eretz Yisrael at that time, unquestionably, as we will see later when Rabbeinu Zal met the Avraham Zal, what he said about him. Now these two Jews came back from Eretz Yisrael, from visiting Avraham Zal. They were associated with him. They helped to raise the funds, and they came from Eretz Yisrael and stayed now in this section of the city where Rabbeinu Zal was. Rabbeinu Zal, in going to Eretz Yisrael, had selected one person, one man, to accompany him on this entire journey. It's important to note that there are many conjectures, many guesses by many people as to who this Talmud was. Some say this was Rabbi Shimon Zal, Rabbeinu Zal's first Talmud, the oldest one. Some say it could not have been him. All these are guesses, and we state emphatically that no one honestly knows who this Talmud was, and therefore it is better not to guess. For whatever reasons Rabbeinu Zal chose to keep the name of this Talmud anonymous, R Nosson Zal never revealed this name, so that it is best to leave it just as the aide, the assistant, or the Talmud who accompanied Rabbeinu Zal on this trip to Eretz Yisrael. This Talmud was told by Rabbeinu Zal, he was made to promise, to vow that he would not reveal Rabbeinu Zal's identity. He was traveling incognito and chose to keep his identity unknown for an obvious reason, which we'll see shortly. Now, these two men who were coming from Eretz Yisrael, returning to Europe, knew they were close friends of Rabbeinu Zal's Talmud. They had never seen Rabbeinu Zal himself. So now Rabbeinu Zal told us, Talmud, when you see these two men, you must promise again that you will not reveal who I am under any conditions, no matter what happens, no matter what you see. The Talmud, of course, made this vow. He agreed. When these two Chassidim came, they saw this Talmud. They were very happy to see him, and they began to question him as to what his destiny was, the fact he was going to Eretz Yisrael, why he was going there, and with whom he was traveling. They asked him, who is this young person you're going with? Rabbeinu Zal was very young at the time, compared to the famous tzaddikim who were in late ages. Rabbeinu Zal was only in his 20s. But the Talmud, of course, would not reveal, and said, I don't know exactly who he is, but I'm going together with him to Eretz Yisrael. The two Chassidim began to question Rabbeinu Zal, and they were very curious as to who he was. They tried to question him with devious means, using all types of tricks, but they could not, under any conditions, solve the identity of the stranger. So they asked Rabbeinu Zal's Talmud, does your Rebbe know, your Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman Zal, know that you're going to Eretz Yisrael with this person? Did he give you permission to do it? And Rabbeinu Zal's Talmud said yes. But by this time, the two Chassidim refused to believe Rabbeinu Zal's Talmud. They began to dislike him because they felt he was lying to them. And so they started on a campaign of insulting and harassing Rabbi Nachman. So they would try to catch him with these devious means. They asked Rabbi Nachman once suddenly, "Are you a Kohen?" Rabbi Nachman said, "Yes." "Fine." And a short time later they would speak about a different topic and say, "You a Levi?" Rabbi Nachman said, "Yes, I am." Third time they would say, "Are you a Kohen Levi or Yisrael?" He would tell me, "Yisrael." Then they would say to him, "Whatever you are, it seems you don't have the quality of truth, because you cannot be a Kohen Levi Yisrael." Ben Azar replied, "I did tell the truth, because I happen to be one who possesses the qualities of the inherent qualities, the kedusha of these three. A pure keli, a vessel that contains all that is good. A keli contains taiv, is one that contains the midas of chesed, kindness, din, judgment, and tiferes, heavenly beauty. This keli, Kohen Levi Yisrael, keli, a Kohen is a midas sphere of chesed, a Levi is din, Yisrael is tiferes. I happen to possess all these midas, these qualities, and therefore I said I am a Kohen as far as the sphere is concerned." The men began to curse him and to insult him, and then they were not satisfied. They continued to inquire, to interrogate him, and they felt that perhaps he was the son of a very famous Kamarna Rebbe, Hasidic Rebbe in Europe, whose name was Yeshaya. They tested him by suddenly catching him off guard and calling him, "Yeshaya, come here." He would jump up and run to them, and they would say, "Now we know who you are. You are Yeshaya, the son of the Kamarna." Venador would say, "Who? The Kamarna? Oh, fire upon him." He could never say that about his father. They were sure that he couldn't be the son of the Kamarna now, and so they gave that up. But they still felt a slight suspicion. They let the conversation lag. Then they said in a voice that was audible, "We happen to have a gift with us that the Kamarna sent for his son Yeshaya." Ben Azar ran to them and said, "Please let me see my gift." And they said, "Well, you are the son of the Kamarna." Ben Azar said, "Of course not." So this went on for a while, and there was no way that they could solve the problem of his identity. They continued to question further, and every person they would suspect that he would admit to being. When they would ask him, "How can you be all these people?" he would say, "I am Kolel, I encompass the qualities of all Jews. I was zecher to all these qualities, and therefore whoever you say I am part of that one." And in truth, of course, to understand this slightly, we know the Gemara says that Isha Achas Yolda, there was one woman whose name was Yocheved. In Egypt, she gave birth to 600,000 Jews, meaning she gave birth to Moshe Rabbeinu. And yet it is as though she gave birth to 600,000 Jews, because he was equals to all the 600,000 Jews combined. The tzadik emes encompasses his kolel, the kedusha of the neshama of all the Jews alive, and therefore Rabbi Arizal was naturally telling the truth when he said he's kolel every one of them, at least. This went on for a long period of time, and on Shabbos he asked to be invited to their room to eat with them because he had no meat, and they refused to accept him. They invited his Talmud instead. He was forced to eat dairy on Shabbos. But while they were eating, he broke into their room. He went inside forcibly, began to speak to them, began to argue with them, and this argument became a violent one, and they threw him out of the room. This was Friday night, and again on Shabbos the same thing occurred. Ben Azal told his Talmud that the reason for all this, reason for going through this harassment, these insults, and this extreme degradation was the key to his being able to get to Eretz Yisrael alive and returning alive. If not for this degradation, if not for this tremendous yirida, being set down, brought to such a low point, then he could never make the tremendous aliyah that he was destined to make at that time. A person can never rise up to a high point without first descending first. This is known as Yerida Tzedech Aliyah. Before going up, a person must first go down. This is the secret to all the reasons why the Jews too had to go to Mitzrayim first, Egypt, which is the lowest form of Tumah, the land of the most Tumah that exists, 49 degrees of Tumah, practically 50, before they can become holy enough to go up to Eretz Yisrael to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. This is the reason too why we mentioned last time that Avraham had to go down to Mitzrayim before going to Eretz Yisrael. The reason for all the Yeridas, the descents before the Aliyahs. Every person too, if he wants to rise up, must go through this test of going down a lot and then rising up. Arizal says this is the secret, the actual secret why when we go from one section of tefillah to the next. Tefillah is divided into 4 parts until Baruch She'amar, when you can still speak, corresponds to this world, the physical world, the Elam HaAsiyah. The tefillah from Baruch She'amar until Yishtabach corresponds to the Elam HaYetzidah, the world of angels, the angelic world where you have these songs of the angels giving praise to Hashem, the Halalukas. From Baruch Hu until Shemona Esrei is the Elam HaBriyah, known as the Elam HaKisei, the heavenly world of the throne. Kaviyachol, we can use the term the throne of Hashem. Throne refers to sitting, and therefore it is imperative, it is compulsory for a person to sit during that time, during the saying of the Kriyat Shema. The Shemona Esrei itself corresponds to the 4th, the highest world, Elam HaTzilus, when a person is alone in the highest of worlds before Hashem, stands before Hashem. Now when a person does that, he's got to rise from one level to the next. And that's why we have, entering into the Elam HaBriyah, we have Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu means that each one bows. He must bow down, that stands for, that represents the Yerida going down before rising up again to a higher Elam. When you start the Shemona Esrei, you have, again, Baruch Atah Hashem, you first bow before you come up to the higher elevation of the top world. So the Arizal said that for this highest of all steps in his life, to go to Eretz Yisrael, and there to attain, to achieve the Aliyah that would make him the greatest tzadik of that generation, because he already was that, but the greatest tzadik up to Chiddush Ha'olam. To achieve that, he would have to have the biggest possible Yerida, the greatest degradation possible. And because he was able to take this, because he was able to suffer through this, he was able to realize this trip and make it a reality. Something which the Baal Shem Tov could not do. Baal Shem Tov could not let himself go down, degrade himself that much, and therefore he was not able to fulfill his plans, his hopes to get to Eretz Yisrael. However, the fact was that at the end, when they were about to depart, these 2 men made a last-ditch stand to find out the identity of Rabbi Arizal. Rabbi Arizal said to them, "Allow me to give you a letter to bring to my hometown." They refused, but they did accept a letter from Rabbi Arizal's Talmud. Rabbi Arizal's Talmud gave them the letter. Rabbi Arizal enclosed secretly his own letter inside his Talmud's envelope. He gave this to the 2 men. They took the letter, they set out on their journey homewards, and they immediately began to look for that letter to find out the identity of the Talmud's companion. They could not find that letter at all. There was no way they could find it. It had disappeared mysteriously. When they got home, they first discovered the letter in their possession. They opened it, and they learned the identity of Rabbi Arizal. They were shocked, they were stunned, and they were heartbroken over what they had done. Immediately afterwards, one of the 2 had done the most insulting, used the most insulting remarks to the Arizal. He died immediately afterwards. And the fact that he died became famous. It was known, and later on, Rabbi Arizal's Talmud asked Rabbi Arizal this question, a very important question. He said it is a fact that this person did insult the tzadik emes. Even though he did not know the true identity of the tzadik emes, the fact was he insulted him. If a person insults a king, he is supposed to get death, even if the king's identity is unknown. It is true, but at the same time, isn't it a fact that this person would not pay the penalty of death if not for the fact that the tzaddik wants him to be punished? If Rabbi Arizal would say, I forgive, I want him exonerated, I want him excused, and not to have to go through any punishment on my part, he would not die. The Talmud asked Rabbi Arizal, the Gemara says as a posek, Gam anoish la tzadik lo tov. It is not good for a tzadik to punish a person. It is much better for a tzadik to forgive, to overlook his kavod, and to avoid having persons pay penalties because of the tzaddik. Of course, there are many stories about that in the Gemara, but still, basically, we cannot get away from that pasuk. The Gemara does say that it is better for a tzaddik not to punish a person. Though he has the power to, a tzaddik can cause the death of any person who angers him, yet it is much better for a tzaddik not to cause the punishment of a person. And so he asked Rabbi Nachman, how come this person died? Surely, you did not want him to die. It wasn't you who punished him, was it? Rabbi Nachman replied, of course, he did not die because of the fact that I wanted him to die. If it was up to me, for what he did to me, I would not have him die. Because the truth is that I benefited very much from this. It's only because of his insults that I'm zecher to get that Yisrael. But at the same time, if I would say I forgive and I forget, it would be a big chilul Hashem. It would be a disgrace because people would say you can speak disrespectfully to a tzaddik and get away with it. So how do we get this reconciled to have both? The tzaddik should not punish, and yet the person should suffer punishment. What happens then is that Hashem is mazmin, Hashem brings about a meeting of two people. One who deserves death anyhow, a person who is going to die, brings that person to the tzaddik who has to suffer for some reason. For example, this person who just died, he was supposed to die anyway. He was brought about to come to this meeting place. He insulted me. He spoke disrespectfully. He committed a sin that deserved a death penalty. And then when he went home, he died. It looked like he died because he insulted a tzaddik. This was a kiddush Hashem. It taught people a lesson to respect Hashem, respect the Torah, respect tzaddikim. At the same time, I am free. I did not cause that death because his time was up anyhow. This Rabbi Nachman explained as a secret to his Talmud, but it explains many other mysterious happenings. We can understand then why many times we find in the Gemara or other cases where a tzaddik looked at a person and just one harsh look, Nosson by Einav, one harsh look, and the person fell dead. The person's body disintegrated. It would seem strange to us that a tzaddik would go around killing people. And this statement of Rabbi Nachman sheds light on all those cases in the Gemara and later history. It's a treasure of a bit of information. Now, the extended stay by Rabbi Nachman in Istanbul was due, of course, to the fact that he had to wait for a ship to arrive, a ship to leave from there to Eretz Yisrael. Meanwhile, a ship arrived from Europe, another one, carrying the famous tzadik Rav Zev from China. And this tzadik was so great that when he came to Istanbul, he asked about the whereabouts of Rabbi Arizal, knowing he had left for Eretz Yisrael. This time, Rabbi Arizal revealed his identity to him, and his tzadik began to plead with Rabbi Arizal to come to stay with him, to eat in his place, to stay with him for Shabbos. Rabbi Arizal refused absolutely. He did not want to go there to receive any kind of kavod, any kind of honors given by him. However, a short time later, a plague broke out, a very serious, deadly plague. Rabbi Arizal was forced to leave his vicinity, and he was forced to stay in the home of Rabbi Nachman, and there he stayed for Shabbos. Now, while there, Rabbi gave him the greatest kavod possible, and contrary to the kavod shown him, Rabbi Arizal showed the strangest type of behavior. When it came time to daven, he had finished davening already, Friday night. Came time to daven in the mornings, he wasn't there. The afternoon too, he finished quickly. When Zev Chana was sitting eating shalashudas, Rabbi Arizal quickly finished and davened Mariv and walked around already after Shabbos was over. Zev Chana saw this. Instead of conducting the table of shalashudas as he would usually with his Chassidim, he benched immediately, davened Mariv quickly, and went to join Rabbi Arizal. This was a very great display of extraordinary respect to Rabbi Arizal, who it would appear that he was insulting the honor of Rabbi Zev Chanazal. But Rabbi Zev Chanazal did not take any offense whatsoever. He accepted all this and ran quickly to do the bidding, to follow the actions of Rabbi Arizal. This went on the entire Shabbos. However, when Shabbos was over, then Rabbi Zev Chanazal began to speak to Rabbi Arizal privately, and they spent the entire night in privacy. Now try to understand what transpired that night. Imagine speaking to Rabbi Arizal an entire night, what Rabbi Zev Chanazal benefited and what knowledge he gained, what Torah he learned from Rabbi Arizal's discussions during the entire evening. Imagine now, we can understand that this tzadik was zecher to understand and have faith in the holiness of Rabbi Arizal, and was willing to undergo a seeming session of disrespectful acts by Rabbi Arizal, bowed his head, accepted them in front of his students, and continued to show subordination to Rabbi Arizal, subservience. And for this he was zecher to the greatest possible schus, to spend the whole night to have Rabbi Arizal reveal to him the heavenly secrets that are so priceless. This, of course, is a lesson for everyone. A person who is willing to take abuse, even today, a person today who maintains his stolid faith in the tzadik emes, who shows his sincerity, his allegiance to Rabbi Arizal in pure faith, despite the fact that there is so much opposition, despite the fact that there are strangers and there are members of his family even who oppose this alliance, who are against this type of Chassidus, or this type of belief in a tzadik. And if he remains solid, he will have Rabbi Arizal's secrets revealed to him. Secrets meaning the closeness. Just as he moves towards a closeness to Rabbi Arizal, he will find Rabbi Arizal drawing him close to him. This is the reward for one who is willing to go through efforts, to go through suffering, to go through difficulties, and remaining pure in his faith to the tzadik emes. Now finally, the war became so intensified that Napoleon's army had entered into both Alexandria and Eretz Yisrael. For that reason, Turkey did not allow any ships to leave to Eretz Yisrael, the Mediterranean, because Eretz Yisrael was now occupied partially by Napoleon's army. So there was no way for a boat to go from Istanbul to Eretz Yisrael unless the person was willing to take a boat illegally and to literally risk his life. At this point, Rabbi Arizal turned to his Talmud and said to him, I give you the opportunity to return home. I intend to go to Eretz Yisrael despite the fact that there is a danger, a hazard to our lives. I'm willing to go, though it may mean death, may mean dying in the effort, but I'm willing to go through and take every risk possible. I do not want to risk your life, so you may now leave. I'll give you enough money to go back home, and you're not bound to me any longer. The Talmud's reply was the reply of Rus to Nomi. Talmud said, wherever my Rebbe shall go, I shall go too. If it means death, I shall gladly die too. And of course, a reply like that is what merited this Talmud to be the one, imagine, the one to get to Eretz Yisrael with Rabbi Arizal, a moment of the greatest illumination in Rabbi Arizal's life. And so, because they were so determined, Menachem from heaven, if a person wants to do a mitzvah and he goes to the furthest extreme, then there is assistance given from heaven. At that moment there was a chacham, that is a Sephardic rabbi, very great Sephardic rabbi, living in Istanbul temporarily, and he was a rabbi from Yerushalmi. Rabbi Chacham from Yerushalmi, a very holy rabbi, and he suddenly spoke up and told the people, announced that he had received a message from heaven, a vision, that told him two things. It told him he was about to pass away, his time had come, very shortly he must pass away, and also that he must return to Eretz Yisrael because there is a special place in Yerushalmi, a grave that is set aside for him, and he will get to that grave. So therefore he is assured from heaven that he will reach Eretz Yisrael safely regardless of what wartime dangers there are. And therefore he's going to take a ship to Eretz Yisrael. Whoever wants to join him, whoever believes in his greatness, can come with him and be certain of getting to Eretz Yisrael safely. There were many people, men, women, and children, tremendous number of people who joined him. They hired a large ship, they chartered a large ship, and they joined with him. Rabbi Arizal and his Talmud too joined in this group. Rabbi Arizal spoke to this tzadik and said to the tzadik, let us make a pact. And when we get to Eretz Yisrael, I want to go directly to Yerushalmi. I do not want to go to Tzafas or Tiberias. I want to go straight to Yerushalmi. I want to go with you. They both made this pact, this agreement, that they would head straight for Yerushalmi when they got to Eretz Yisrael. Now, they got onto this ship, and on this ship, which was so heavily packed, it was filled. Note, this is an important part of the story. This was a very special ship. It was carrying this Yerushalmi Chacham, this one of the chief rabbis of Yerushalmi, but it was carrying Rabbi Arizal on this historic journey to Eretz Yisrael. It's important to note who else was on this ship, who historically took part in this journey. The fact was that on this ship there was a combination of Ashkenazim and Sephardim, both. There were practically an equal number of Ashkenaz Jews and Sephardic Jews on this trip with Rabbi Arizal to Eretz Yisrael, the greatest journey in history. So this definitely would be a symbol for the future, that there will come a time when there will be followers of Rabbi Arizal, both of the Ashkenaz and Sephardic faith. And not only that, there will come a time when there'll be a trip, not by ship, by plane, with a group of Rabbi Arizal's followers, Ashkenaz and Sepharad together. This is what we spoke about during the very first trip that we took the Sephardic community, when they began to teach the teachings of the Arizal to the Sephardim. And the very first trip we had with a number of Sephardic students going to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalmi. This was, of course, before 67, before the time of the Kaisel, and the main point of that trip was to go to visit the main Talmud Bavly in Yerushalmi, Shlita, and the grave of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehoy Zal, that represents the cave of the tzadik emes in Eretz Yisrael. So it was very reminiscent then. There was a repetition to a degree of this trip, where there were Ashkenazim and Sephardim together on that first trip, which of course was repeated many times afterwards. In fact, even last year we had a number of Sephardim and Ashkenazim. In fact, even this time too. This summer also we had Sephardim and Ashkenazim in the trip. But it shows that there should be a unity, a harmony between both. And it can be only when they follow the Arizal. Otherwise you can see the vast split between them. So the one who can bring unity between these two separated camps is the Arizal's spirit through his Talmidim. Now on this journey, when they left Istanbul, we know too that a storm broke out, and it seemed the entire ship was in danger. For an entire night, the ship was buffeted about by the storm. People on the ship began to cry and scream and daven different forms, Sla, Sully, daven to Hashem, praying for help to be saved, to be spared, their lives be spared from drowning in the storm. During all this time, Arizal sat very silently, did not join them in tefillah, just sat and watched them, in fact, practically disdainfully. And people came running to him and asked, "Why are you silent at a time like this? You see the lives of all these people in danger. Why are you silent?" And he said to them, "Why are you screaming? It'd be much better off if you kept silent. We'd be safe then." Arizal's words penetrated. They respected Arizal so, apparently as the leader, that they all turned silent. They stopped screaming, and shortly afterwards the storm abated. They found that they were safe. Of course, again, the mystery as to why is it better to be silent, and we are always taught, if you're ever in trouble, turn to Hashem in tefillah. Turn to Hashem. If ever there is a problem, if ever you need help, do not turn to doctors or to scientists. Turn to the one that can help. And the key is tefillah. What was wrong with their actions? We will not attempt to answer this except for the obvious fact that if you have one that can accomplish an act for you, don't try to do it yourself. They had the Arizal there. They should have turned to the tzadik emes, let the tzadik emes take care of this problem with tefillah and so on. They tried to do it themselves. That was their error, apparently. And they finally turned to the Arizal. Listen to the Arizal, even when he said silence. They obeyed that. This is what saved their lives. So again, this shows, of course, always that obedience to the words of the tzadik emes is the only salvation for a person. This obedience, the Gemara says, is found in a posek by Sosim and Adava, Yeminu Smel. Do not turn away from the words of the rabbis to the right or to the left. Which means, do not turn away to the left. If they tell you to do a mitzvah, don't turn to the left. Leftists are ones who turn away from Kedusha or from mitzvahs. Do not turn to the left, that is understood. But if they tell you to do something moderately, do not turn to the right either. Do not become radical about it and go overboard or do more than you are told to do, because that too is wrong. That's the lesson, the most important lesson in obedience, which is dependent upon pure emunah. And we see that tzadik be'emunasa yichya. The lives of these people depended upon the degree of emunah and tzadik. A person can live only with this true emunah. And that is why, ultimately, we see that the lives of the entire population on this boat, on this ship, was saved because they had emunah in Arizal's words, even when he said to stop davening. That is the key to a person's life and a person's success. The continuation of this journey culminated, of course, in the arrival in Eretz Yisrael. Finally, we'll take this up in the next chapter, next episode, next week, Mitzvah Shem. Let us hope that we will glean the important lesson in Musa Haskell from this story. We'll be zecher to have this true emunah shlema, the pshitas between us and the tzadik emes and the Arizal, and that schus will be zecher too, to come to Eretz Yisrael, led by Moshiach, the coming of Moshiach, and see with our eyes the geula shlema, the binyan beis hamikdash and heda. Amen. Be amen.
Amen.